Just a little tiny bit of information about these co-op conversations, as we call them. We have a variety of these type of events, both in person and online across the year. They started because of COVID, where we couldn't actually become in a room face to face. And these have been quite successful. A whole host of different discussions, beekeeping being the most successful one, which was an amazing session, and we're going to repeat that this year. But what you can do is head on over to our Mid-Counties homepage. You can see the web address there on the screen, and click on the member section, events, and then you'll see our list of events being populated there for this type of conversation. You may see one that's of interest to you that you can book on from there. So if you want to take a look at that, that's where that is. Those of you that are tweeters or Facebookers, if you want to, while we're going through the session, just drop a note onto your social platform just to say what you're doing this afternoon with Mid-Counties, and hopefully that just promotes this type of conversation a little bit more in your communities, your own networks, and a bit wider. That would be lovely if you could do that for us. And the spirit of today's session is very informal. We'll have a good natter. Everybody's opinion is important. No right or wrong questions or answers. And we just, learn from each other and share our experience and knowledge, which is what this is about today. So I'm now going to hand over to Connor, who will be taking the first part of this session. So we're sharing a computer, so I'm just going to quickly move out of the way and hope you enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dev. That was a great introduction. So as you can see, today we're going to be going through a few different things about where to look for grants, how to write applications, how to plan for the future, and then, of course, our two lovely guest speakers. Just to give you some background as to who I am as well and why I feel somewhat qualified enough to talk about grants, is that I completed a program called 2027. That's how I'm here with Mid-Counties today. And that program was all about putting people from working class backgrounds into positions within the grant making industry. So on top of working for Mid-Counties, I've also done a lot of sessions of experts over the last year. So what we're here today isn't my opinion, it's the advice I've got from them. And also in my personal life as well, I've benefited from receiving funding, and I've kind of had all perspectives because I assess grants as part of my job at Mid-Counties. On top of that, I also apply for grants in my personal and professional life. And of course, I've learned all about them too. So I've seen all angles. So it gives you a good perspective, let's just say. So yeah, let's get into it. So one thing to mention as well is that I'm going to change slides, but sometimes it doesn't always change in everyone's screen. Hopefully, if it doesn't, there's a button, a little arrow that you can press to go to the next one. So just bear that in mind as well. So without further ado, one of the first things I always think is important to think about grants is that actually finding out about them. A lot of you haven't got experience in this already, so I might be preaching to the choir, but there are different models out there. There are free services you can use, there are subscription services, and then there's also search engines as well. I'll get onto that in a second. The big question is it worth using a subscription service? Some of these can cost hundreds of pounds a year, so it's quite a lot. And my very short answer would be, it's only worth having a subscription service if you're a fundraising officer, because that's that level of investment you're already putting in to having a full-time fundraiser. So then sure, it's a couple hundred extra pounds isn't that big of a deal if you're paying their wages. But if you're just an individual going out there looking for grants for your group or yourself, personally, I think there's so much free stuff out there in terms of free websites giving you advice and whatnot, but you don't need necessarily to pay for a subscription service. I've used some of these myself, as we've got here, Turn to Us, Get Grants, Grants Online. They're really good because they've got their own small search functions on there themselves. So you can put, where you are in the country, what your sort of social agenda is, time frames, amounts, that kind of thing. So there are so many free things out there. I'm not saying don't go out and get a subscription service. I just think if you're starting, you don't need necessarily to go straight into subscription stuff. And as I said, I've used these services myself. I can vouch for them that they do have quite a lot of current stuff on there. There's nothing more annoying than going on a website and some things 5 years out of date. You know, these things are kept current by people that work for them. So yeah, I would definitely say start there. Other thing to mention here as well, 360 GrantNav, as well as the Charity Commission's website, these are really, really good in-depth tools you can use for finding the full extent of all the grants out there. There must be, well, I know because I just looked at it, there are tens of thousands of different grant providers in the UK and across Europe, and you can still access funding, of course, internationally too. There are so many funders out there, sometimes it's just hard to find them all. However, the Charities Commission's website has now got a search function on there where it's a box that says makes grants to organizations, and within that you can still choose what area you're in, you know, what your agenda is, etc. But it shows you a fully comprehensive list because, as you probably already know, all charities have to be registered and are on the Charity Commission. So the fact that you've got a tool now that shows you every single charity giving grants to other organizations, it's just limitless in the power that it has. 360 GrantNav does the same thing. It's just a lot more specific and a bit harder to use. You've got to be a little bit more tech savvy in order to get through some of the functions they've got. Still a great organization, still highly recommend using their service. But the Charity Commission's website is very simple. It takes less clicks to get to your end result, which is always the most simple thing. If you can only click 4 or 5 buttons and then you get, you know, tens of thousands of grant providers all in front of you. I mean, really simple, right? So when it comes to free places to look, yeah, the ones you see on screen, we'll send out the slides afterwards, or you can take a note of them. But I personally use them. I can recommend them, and the free stuff out of there is definitely a good place to start. And only if you're funding officer, I would say to actually get the subscription stuff. So before I just touch on that, go to the next slide. I thought I'd go into the application tips cover letter first because some grant providers, that's the first thing that they'll see. So I thought it's sort of best to keep it in a chronological order in a way. And again, this is advice I've received. It's not just my opinion. And the things you see on here, you don't have to necessarily do all of them in one cover letter or all of them in one application. But some of these things, yeah, again, I've used and I've been successful with. And it's just small things that might make you stand out to other people. Because at the end of the day, when you're applying for funding, you are essentially competing with other people for those pots of money. So you have to seem more attractive than the average application. Of course, some funds are more applied to than others. So you can think of, well, I'll just give the Mid-Counties example. We're quite open. We're a small grant as well. We only get £500, and we don't have many criteria, and we're not too heavily oversubscribed. So we can be a bit more, you know, benefit of a doubt, lenient to people. However, some funds, especially when you're in the tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands, etc., it's going to be quite hard, and there's heavy competition for that. So the little things do add up when you do them. So yeah, as again, you don't have to do all of these in one application, but I definitely think at least a couple is a great way to go about. Starting off right at the start with a question at the front of your cover letter, saying something like, could you have benefited from more earlier support in your childhood? You know, relating it to the person assessing the grant, making them think about their life, and instantly, I think you grab their attention a little bit more than just a generic statement might be. Again, it's quite short and sharp as well, so it's just all about, as we say, grabbing their attention, making yourself stand out. Many people aren't doing this, so it's a good place to start. If you don't want to, of course, there's other ways to start too, but I personally quite like it. It's always grabbed my attention when I'm assessing grants. Yeah, it's quite unique. It sounds basic to say this, but actually stating what you do and where you're going are very important, because if you're writing 10 applications a day, or you've already put the name of your group somewhere in the title and it's a bit self-explanatory, you can almost rush past that really basic setting of the scene. You know, if you cast your mind back to when you were in school doing English essays or whatever, you're always told sort of start with the basics first. If you can do the basics, then worry about the specifics later. But what you do, explain that history to your group, but also where you're going. It's good enough to say that, you know, we've been around for 30 years and we've done this and we're doing that, but also giving that vision into the future, because at the end of the day, you're applying for a grant that's going to be future money for future projects. So if you're quickly stating at the start where you're going as well, I think it just lets the assessor know that, you know, you're a thought through organization, you've got plans, and you're quite clear and succinct in it. You don't have to go on for too long, but just quickly saying the direction, how that links to your past as well. Quickly, just why is it important? This is especially true for the last point of when others aren't working on the same issue as you. So it's all good and well that you're supporting autistic people in your area or you're supporting care leavers in your area, but why is this important? What does it link to? You know, is there a clear correlation between care leavers not being given the right support and higher crime rates or higher mental health service use? If you're explaining why it's important, then it helps someone who maybe doesn't have much knowledge of your industry, if in that sense of the words, it explains to them why that's important. So I think that's really, really vital, because otherwise they sort of aren't connected to the wider piece. They need to put it in terms that some people understand. So you're just helping them connect the dots. That's all it is. What programs do you run? So yes, you're a dementia support group, but within that, do you have 3 different types of services? Do you have 2? Do you have 1? Again, these are basic things that probably a lot of you already do. It's just worth pointing out that you have to get the basics across. Don't presume that they know you already. Don't presume that they've visited your website. Some of these people might be reading dozens of applications a day. So they just want the points short and sharp, delivered to them. So just explaining in as much clear but concise detail as you can who you are, what you run, that kind of thing. This is a really important one, this next one. If you get a quote or a sentence from one of your service users into your cover letter, or even if you're to get your service users to write some of your application or cover letter themselves, that shows a really strong level of engagement with your service users, because you're showing that you're not just a top-down organization, but you're actually really people-led, and your whole ethos and what you're about connects to the people you're supporting. And I think it just gives confidence to the people funding you that, oh, okay, our money is going to go to the right kind of places. You know, this is worthwhile and, you know, a very well-rounded group. So getting a quote in, at least, I always recommend, because it makes you stand out. Again, not everyone does this, so I think it's really important to do that. Maximum 2 pages, 1.5 really is more than enough. Again, people might be skim reading these. Don't use too much, you know, frivolous language or whatever. Just keep it quite short, and they'll appreciate that. And again, are other people working on this issue? If so, that's all right. You can show some level of collaboration. A funder isn't going to want to fund 3 different types, 3 different groups, all doing the same thing in the same area. They want to at least know that you know what else is out there. Because if you're saying, we're the only group in Shropshire dealing with this, and they do a quick Google search and actually there's 4 other groups doing it, they're going to think, oh, you're not very connected into your local community, you're not collaborating with other groups. So even if there are other people doing the same thing as you, just say that at least. And if there isn't other people doing what you're doing, amazing, talk about that, because it's going to make you look really important compared to other groups. So yeah, some of you might, again, be doing a lot of these things, but if you can do at least half of those in a cover letter, I think it stands you in a really good stead for the rest of it. Going on to the next slide now. This is just more general tips as well. These are relevant to all sizes of applications. So whether you're applying for a couple £100 or a couple 100,000 potentially, these things all ring true. Local funders always a priority because they're going to be able to connect with your group more than an international or a national funder. And maybe you can just build up a relationship with them more. It's sort of knowing your funder as well. I'm going to go on to it in a little bit, but if you know that your funder is after a specific type of organization, a specific area, you're going to get a good rapport with that grant officer on the other end of the line. So yeah, local funders, always a priority. If you're applying for 10 grants in a day, I'd always say that first one should be the one you've got the most chance of getting, you know, a local one connected to exactly your agenda, because some of these can take quite a long time. And if you're applying to ones that are a little bit more shaky to begin with, then you might find you're unsuccessful, as if you applied to the local one first, then at least you would have known you got that one. So yeah, that kind of combines my second point, obviously, about prioritizing the ones you've got highest chance with. Quite self-explanatory, but yeah, I just don't want people wasting time on long applications where they might not have as good a chance in. Again, keeping it short. I think there's definitely a line with this, because if you keep it too short, obviously you're going to leave the funder thinking, oh, well, I don't know enough about this group. But if you're giving too much information, or especially if you're doing it in less applicable part of the application, you know, some people, they see the first text box and they think, right, time to write everything in this one text box. And they don't realize later on, there's going to be a chance for you to explain the other parts of your organization and your programs. Don't say it all at once. Give yourself a bit of time to spread it out over the application, so you're not repeating yourself. You're doing it at the most valid points. They'll appreciate that. So yeah, if I ask for X, don't give X, Y, Z, because that chance will probably come later. When it comes down to numbers, we always say this at Mid Counties: when someone shows that they've really budgeted and thought through their application, it gives you a level of confidence, because you know these people are planned. They're not just taking chances. They've worked out budgets. They've gone out and got quotes from multiple places and organizations. It fills you with confidence. Be realistic. You know, there's no point trying to seem like you're doing things cheaper than possible, or, you know, if it's an £1,000 grant, applying for £900 isn't going to make you more favourable. Funders generally are looking for that social value added, rather than, oh, how can we save a few quid on application here and there. Don't feel afraid to ask for that bigger amount, but be realistic when you're giving your own numbers from your side. This doesn't account for everyone, this next one, because very small organizations won't have income streams, but funders are very favorable to charities that are more sort of future-proof or crisis-proof in a way. You see a lot of it post-COVID, these fresh waves of funding, because organizations weren't prepared, obviously, for the pandemic, but just in general for changes to their plans. And I think I've been told at least, that now contingency plans and things like that are really important. And if you can show that you've got more than one stream of income, and if there were to be policy changes or societal changes or management changes, you're going to be able to come out the other end positively. So it's not that you're going to be thrown into the bin, your application, if you haven't got diversified income stream, or you haven't got more than one income stream or any income stream. It's just that when you're applying for bigger grants, generally, they'll favour the diversified ones. Again, this next one is related to large grants quite a lot, but if you're a small organization and your outgoings only total a few £1,000s a year. Oh, let's go on to the next one somehow. Go back. But yeah, if your total income only goes to a couple of £1,000s a year, and suddenly you're applying for grants in the tens of thousands, it's going to worry funders a little bit. You know, sometimes it is about baby steps. Apply to the smaller grants, show that you're capable of handling that level of funding, and then go to the bigger ones. There's no point trying to jump ahead into the big leagues, as it were, of grants, because it might even just set you up for failure in the long term anyway, having too much funding at once. So yeah, focus on the small ones first, what you need rather than what you want always as well. Getting to know the funder, I think this is really important. It's just a way of trying to get your foot in the door that a little bit more. So the language, as I've used here, is we know at Funder X you care about this and that. So our programs do exactly that. It's just trying to convince them that you're the most worthy recipient of their money compared to other groups. You know, here at the Co-op, we're all about cooperating and colluding and not necessarily competing with one another, but actually funding is limited out there. And why wouldn't you give the best account for yourself? Why wouldn't you show what you're about better than anyone else at the end of the day? So don't feel scared to talk about yourself and big yourselves up in these applications, because other people are. And if you're not doing it, then someone else is, and you're going to lose out. So that's my advice on that. And again, this last one is about looking into the future a bit, just saying things like, in 5 years' time, the problem will be this if we don't do this now. It shows that level of planning, understanding of the issue that are really important when accessing grants. And again, it's giving the people the less of a reason to reject you. So you're showing them, like, we know exactly what we're doing here. We've been there, done that, we're experienced. So yeah, just a small tip as well. So next slide. I'm not going to spend long on this because I'm not an expert in financial planning, but this is advice I've directly received from experts. So I'll go through the points quickly, but maybe Kate can touch on them a bit later on in the Q&A session, for example. On the next slide, I've got some examples of business plans you guys can use. And it's not just business plans, it's all types of charts. They're helpful for planning stuff in your organization. But a good business plan forms the basis of a funding application, because it shows a level of competency. As a charity, sometimes you're so focused on just trying to do good for your service users. We've got so much love in our hearts for the causes that we're a part of, but sometimes you forget the more nitty-gritty side of things where, you know, some grant providers still want to see, you know, extensive levels of documentation for things. So a business plan is going to be a great place to start. It makes you seem quite competent when it comes to finances. So highly recommend that. The appropriateness of the source of the finance to the organization. So again, just making sure that you're closely related to the funder. There are always better options sometimes, because there's tens of thousands of providers out there, of course. But yeah, just making sure it's appropriate. Longer term requirements. Funders, yeah, might ask these kind of questions where they say, what contingency plans do you have? You know, are you going to have to employ more people? Is there a potential for having to let go of people? Do you have to expand your buildings? Have you thought about all these nitty-gritty things? Does your constitution have to change? And it happens all the time with big organizations, even having to do last-minute changes in order to accommodate for funding. So yeah, if you're going to be planning for the future and applying for big grants, you've got to think about any possible hurdles, even if it's just potential ones, a small chance. Just showing that at least you thought about it is really good, fills them with confidence. This is an interesting one, exit strategy. A lot of people get big funding, and then for one reason or another, it goes away. And suddenly you're left with a staff of 6 or 7, and you can't necessarily keep them all on. You've got to make tough decisions about downsizing, or you're expecting to receive funding from a certain place, and then you get to the last stage, everything seemed really good, and unfortunately it falls apart. Having backup plans is going to be so important, because funders sometimes won't even take you on if you haven't even shown, again, exit strategies for the future. So financial stability is critical to obviously the success of your organization, but also to the ability to build into a larger one in the future as well. Again, I'm not an expert in this, so I won't really be able to answer too many questions about financial exit strategies, but information is out there on these business plans, and the links on the next slide. So all the information is on there. Working towards longer financial sustainability. So again, you don't have to necessarily be sustainable right then and there, especially for a small organization, but showing you've got solid plans at least is a great start. So yeah, those are vague points. I'm sorry if it's all just really simple stuff that you know about, but it's the kind of things where small organizations don't always consider, because again, you're so focused on just having enough volunteers for that week, just being able to keep the lights on, that actually forward planning takes up a lot of time and stress in your mind. But it doesn't have to be too stressful. There are plenty of resources out there for you on the National Charity NCVO website, the lottery website as well. I'll go to the next slide where it's going to be. Yeah, got SWOT analysis tables on there as well, Gantt charts to do with project planning, so many things to really sort of formalize aspects of your charity that before might have just been scribbled down on a piece of paper. There are so many free resources out there that I've learned from, and I've really like used in my day job, in my personal life. So I can't recommend it enough. So yeah, I think that pretty much brings to the end of what I was going to say. Hopefully I didn't speak too fast or rush through that too much, but I was conscious of the time. George, I can see your hands up, but I thought if we keep questions to the end, then we can have it all at once. That's perfect. Okay. So what we're going to do now is Christine Brown, who's not with us today in person. However, she has done a pre-recorded presentation, and we're going to click play on. And she doesn't like being called a bid writer because she does so much more than that, but she is more than professional. I've got 30 years experience of building capacity within organizations, helping them have authentic voices. And I think that's what's important when you're writing applications as well, is showing not just your basic things like we are this and we do that. It's why this was formed, why you're different, bringing out your personal touch as well, what makes you different. So yep, we're gonna hand over to her virtual recording. Hopefully the tech works out well on that. And yeah, it's about 8 minutes long, so enjoy.
Hi everybody, my name is Christine Brown from Future Excel. I've been invited to do a short presentation around making funding applications. As I've only got a short 10-minute slot, I thought I'd focus on some of my personal top tips for making funding applications based on my experience in this space. But first, a little bit of background about me. I have nearly 30 years business development experience in the community business and charitable sector. I'm very lucky to be able to work with a wide range of amazing organisations doing fantastic work in their communities. I help organisations develop and grow through putting in place the building blocks to be successful. One of the specialisms I've developed over the years is supporting organisations to develop sustainable income generation strategies and the skills needed to make successful funding applications. My wider work, which includes research, evaluation and supporting funders to develop tender briefs, also gives me a good perspective and understanding of what funders are looking for and why. I've included my email address on the slide in case anybody wants to ask me any follow-up questions after the presentation. So, my first top tip. I always advise organisations that before you even think about putting pen to paper on a grant funder's application, you need to be able to succinctly document your project. This will save you a lot of time in both writing your application, and that can act as a document you can also use to communicate internally and externally about what it is you want to do. It should be short and to the point, definitely no more than 2 sides of A4, and if possible as short as 1 side or about 500 words. You need to be able to describe every element of your project. If you can't, you've still got some development work to do. Never go to funders with underdeveloped or underthought out projects. To help prepare the project summary, I use a list of questions, which helps me to cover off all the key points that I know funders will want to know. The list of questions that I've put up isn't in any way prescriptive, and there are many more questions you can answer if you want to develop a more detailed project brief. But these are a really great starting point for your project brief. So when you're writing your project summary, the starting point is to describe what it is you want to do. But the next big funder for funders will be why. Why is your project needed? And why are you best placed to deliver this project? Most importantly, you must be able to quantify and evidence this need and your track record. So do you have research, statistics, feedback from, or consultation with the community or residents themselves that shows there is a need for this project? And can you demonstrate your experience of delivering similar activities or working with similar groups? Funding is so competitive now that evidence of need can often be the big deciding factor in what does or doesn't get funded. Next, you need to start to think about the detail of your project. For example, who is involved? Think about all the people that will play a part in your project, your beneficiary or your target group, the staff resources you'll need to deliver your project, other organisations and stakeholders who may be involved or key to delivering your project. You then need to be able to describe how you're going to deliver your project, your approaches, your delivery model. Where is it going to be delivered? When is it going to be delivered? Over what period? When will it start? When will it finish? And finally, how much is it going to cost to deliver? And what do those costs look like? Alongside answering those questions, actually prepare a simple budget. You don't need to be a financial whiz to do that. A simple few headings describing your main costs. It's most likely to be staffing costs, beneficiary related costs, management and admin costs, as well as any running costs and overheads that are directly attributable to your project. If you can answer these questions, you're really well on your way to having a well thought out scope project. And with your project summary and budget prepared, you can now confidently start writing your funding application. So my second top tip actually relates to the writing of the funding applications. And the first thing I'd say is that there is no magic art to writing funding applications. Whatever bid writers might tell you, it really is not rocket science. But it is about being able to confidently communicate your story and your project ideas, simply and in your own words. And you are by far the best person to do this. After all, nobody knows your organisation and your project better than you. And yes, I help organisations write funding applications, but what I'm really doing is helping them to build the skills and the capacity to tell their story in a meaningful way. Focus less on being an excellent bid writer and more on being a confident communicator. Some other pointers to writing your funding application: read the questions funders want answering carefully. So many times I see people providing information they want to give, not what the funder is asking for. You don't need to use big words and definitely no jargon. Write in simple, plain English. Anybody in your organisation, from the receptionist to the CEO, should be able to read your application and understand it. Ask people for their feedback to check if it makes sense. Also, don't assume any prior knowledge by the funder. Paint the complete picture. Writing funding applications takes time. This is because every word literally does count. Don't waffle or be repetitive. Ask yourself, does this information add to what I've already told them? Have I answered all the questions? And remember, your story is unique. Your project is unique to you. The perspective funders are coming from is unique to their individual grants. That's why there is no cut and paste standard answers in good, successful funding applications. And my final tip relates to the other things that funders want to know that support your written funding applications. The written narrative of funding applications is only half the story. Funders also want to know a great deal of information about your organisation to ensure you are financially stable, you're well governed and you're well run. After all, they're going to be giving you their money, so they want to know that. That bit's called due diligence, and much of that happens during that initial application process. Don't think of this bit as secondary. It's as important to the funder as the information about your project. Often this information is very similar for most funders, so my top tip is to get your housekeeping in order now. Get yourself an electronic folder of all the things they will likely ask for. For example, your policies and procedures, information about your governance arrangements and your constitution, your financial information, things like previous accounts, in-year budgets, management accounts, future budgets. It can sound a bit overwhelming, but it's only things you will already have in place, or if you don't, will help you to develop as an organisation. So that's it for my 3 top tips for today. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful and something you can take back into your organisations.
So hopefully we're all on the same timings right now and you enjoyed that. Without further ado, I'm going to go on to the next slide and hand you over to Kate Beale. She is the head of one of our charity partners, Just Straight Talk. I'll let her do the explaining of exactly what they do and their new project platform, which she's going to be talking about. So, Kate, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi, thanks Connor, and good afternoon everybody. Thank you for the warm introduction and welcome. I can't vouch for Christine enough either, and the support she gave us last summer when we set about a national lottery reaching communities bid, so well worth taking her email address. I've known Christine about 20 years, since she's been an evaluator on a number of our previous projects. I'm the managing director at Just Straight Talk. We support people to lead better lives over in the Black Country. It's no coincidence Just Straight Talk has grown exponentially over a number of years, since actually probably no coincidence being involved with Mid Counties Co-op. So a big thank you to Mid Counties for all of the support that they always provide to us here at JST and people we support in the community. We're a team of about 18 and sometimes projects have come and gone, but sometimes we've had 23, 24, 25 in the team, but we've finished more recently a couple of big ESF and lottery match funded projects, which were pretty huge, and obviously due to ESF funding now being stopped and finalised, it's meant that some of our other projects have become more smaller bespoke projects, and our current staff team is about 18. We've got about 3 or 4 volunteers at any one time, but all our projects are around helping people to improve their lives overall across Dudley, Sandwell and hopefully soon to be Walsall. Our first grant, our first give, our first donation was £500. The turnover for the last 12 months is anywhere around £600,000 to £650,000, and I've wrote the bids, the contracts, the tenders, and I've wrote the applications here in-house. Only last year with yes, thank you Debbie, European social funded contracts. Only last year I got in touch with Christine to help me with a Reaching Communities lottery application, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today, and hopefully bring some of the tips that Connor and Christine have discussed with you to life really. most of the newer projects we've got coming through, like I said, are smaller, more bespoke projects now that big wide funding has gone, but also a multitude of the projects that we've got on board now, in fact 3, were based on emerging needs and emerging issues due to the pandemic, and the emerging needs and gaps that the pandemic created. So we have one for loneliness and isolation, a digital inclusion project and a carers project, and they've all been born due to emerging needs and issues from the pandemic. So I don't know if you're on slide 15, but if you are, that would be amazing. So if you can move ahead one, if you're still on 12 or 13, 14. Also, interestingly, the last few weeks, I don't think I've mentioned this, Connor, I've been asked to actually score some grant applications. So I'm also on a panel now scoring applications for Know Your Neighbourhood funding, which is loneliness and isolation funding, and sitting on these panels, being asked by to represent the voluntary sector on these panels is also helping me in terms of my own development, and also giving me an opportunity to feed into what I think will work for that set project. And interestingly, because a number of things touch on what Connor's already mentioned and Christine, but it's about organisations that have their local knowledge, that they've read the spec, that can provide the social value for money, that they've got a good track history and track record, and have matched their application to what's being asked, as well as making sure that their budget is well thought out. But based on the fact that I'm here to talk to you about the planning that I've put together for the platform project, I'm just going to give you a whistle stop tour really of my stage 1 and stage 2 reaching communities. I thought about this idea last summer and actually submitted stage 1 in the August, but I was thinking about it from about the spring summer before the final submission of stage 1, which is the first stage. I was looking ahead. I was not thinking of what's the need now. I was looking at the next 12 months. We have a major project here that finishes in March called Bridges. So I was looking at the next 12 months needs, knowing that these big ESF contracts and big, larger kind of support projects were coming to an end. So you've always really got to be planning that 12 months ahead, looking at what's going to be the next emerging need, looking at the gaps, looking at project closures, not just your own, but looking at the landscape across your local authority. Being very well connected to your council of voluntary services will really help with that. I think most areas have a council of voluntary services. If they're a good one, get connected to them. If they're and sit closely with them, if they provide newsletters, make sure you're on their mailing lists and speak to them. They'll have a good landscape knowledge of what's coming up, if not currently, what's coming up in the future in terms of funding platforms. And you need to make sure that really you are building those relationships with them from the get-go. So I was looking at the needs in the next 12 months. I was speaking to other partners, speaking to other partnerships that I have across the Black Country about what we felt was this cliff edge, or what I felt was this cliff edge of support coming to an end for some of the most vulnerable individuals across our communities. There'd be a lack of support, the emerging needs and issues. I felt an absolute strong desire that we would need to be plugging some of those gaps. So I spoke to others about it, and with those conversations, I was able to bring them into my stage 1 application. So there's lots of places you can look for funding, but I'm going to talk about reaching communities. The lottery have an awards for all, which is up to 10,000, and reaching communities, which is over 10,000. If it's over 500,000, it's going to go to England Lottery Panel, and it's a totally different ball game altogether. So stage 1, I looked at a long-term project. Reaching communities is for pockets of communities with the most pushed out, maybe no identity, they don't know which borough they fall into. There's pockets of deprivation, poverty, where people feel most displaced, I guess you could say, maybe underserved, under-recognised communities. So you can't put in a reaching communities by saying we want to cover the whole of Oxford. They really want to know, for example, the very community streets, the neighbourhoods and towns. They also want to make sure that it's reaching the criteria for that area. So what are the major problems in that area? Speaking to people on the streets and asking them what are the gaps. We built a really good relationship with the funding officers. We met with them from the lottery to talk to them about our ideas and the gaps that are coming, and built solid relationships. To help inform the initial stage 1 ideas gathering, which was, like I say, started in June last year, but submitted in early August. And a stage 1 reaching communities, the first question they're going to ask you is, what is your project name? You're doing it online, so you can save it and edit it as much as you want before final submission, but you have 3 months to submit when you open up a reaching communities. Of course, if you don't do it in that time, that's okay. You can close that one down and start another one, but that information won't be saved. So you're doing it all online for lottery reaching communities. So they're asking which project locations it's taking place in, how much money you want from us, what will the money be spent on, what's the actual, why is your organisation the right one to manage the projects, how long do you need the money in the project for, what do you want to do, how does it involve your community, what does your idea and how does your idea fit with the local community? Lots of questions and answers about your organisational details and the strength of your organisation, contact names and policies and information like that. But you don't submit a budget with stage 1. You are just saying what you'd spend the money on and giving them a general overview, an idea of what the project looks like. And to do that, you really need to look back at Christine's examples about some of those questions. But I do have a template. I'm not going to share it now, I'm aware of the time, but I do have a really good template that could be used to format like a stage 1 reaching communities bid. Of course, I'm more than happy for anyone to contact me outside of this meeting if they're looking at submissions of these for any advice and guidance around reaching communities. So I was emailed in September for a response. I actually emailed them to say I haven't heard anything yet, and they responded to say that it's a 12-week turnaround time from a stage 1 submission for first decisions and feedback, and it was going to a pipeline panel on the 6th of October. Prior to the 6th of October, I then had a call from the funding officer asking me that they wanted to clarify a couple of points and questions. This is all very normal stuff, and they wanted to understand further the conversations I'd had locally around taking the direction for this project platform that I had. And just going back, really, the name platform, it is one of the questions that you need to answer for stage 1. The project that I was trying to look at filling what would be a total cliff edge was called Bridges, and although platform is built on a different for similar people from communities, but actually platforms a lot more around group sessions and group connections and well-being for people with mental and physical health problems. Bridges was very much a one-to-one working with people to eliminate barriers to helping them move forward with their life goals. Platform was more around the because of what the pandemic had created, people living in fear and anxiety and not leaving the house, but a way to integrate people back into the community and making new friendships. So I used a thesaurus. I literally went onto Google to think of a project name, and then I asked people lots and lots of ideas about what they thought of a collaboration of project titles, and the winner came up as platform. So I went out last September and had conversations locally, because the lottery officer was telling me, we're going to come and ask you what conversations you've had locally. And although I needed to freshen up and say to other partners, what will be this cliff edge and how is that going to affect people within our communities? Met with the lottery officer. The stage 2 has decided to have gone through, and at stage 2 is due in for the 2nd of December, and it's a lot more meat on the bone. So a reaching community stage 2 is much more about the project aims and summaries, organisational background and strengths and your niche locally. Why are we best placed to lead on this? Project details, about the delivery information, what activities or interventions will take shape, local context, why is this social issues, why are they important locally, partnerships and who we'll connect with, community involvement in shaping and delivering the ideas, impact, what will the impact be and what are the intended measures and outcomes, equality, diversity and inclusion, how we're making sure that the services will be accessible for all, policies and procedures, confirmation and also sending them over so they can be double checked and treble checked at their end, a full budget, accounts copies, future plans as well. So stage 2 is a lot more meat on the bone. It's actually a 10-word sided application really, but it's 10-word documents. Actually stage 2 is much more about inputting all of those areas that I've just mentioned onto a Word template and sending back a budget of which they provide a template, but also the current financial details of the organisation around income and expenditure, and reserves and restricted or restricted reserves. We're not a charity here, but a lot of the templates that the lottery have are built for charities. So you just have to make sure that, you know, you put in a short summary at the bottom to make sure it all makes sense. Going back to why Connor and Christine have said that your budgets all need and your finances need a bit of work. If you're putting in a reaching communities, they really do dig deep with making sure it all matches the information that's been uploaded prior to Companies House, and they do check. We then had a meeting which was set early December after the submission. So the submission was the 2nd of December. We had a meeting shortly after, and I felt it was a very positive meeting. And then the stage 2 lottery panel met mid-December, and we had an answer on the 23rd of December that project had been successful, and that was followed up with the result and offer letter. From a successful application and successful stage 2, you actually get 6 months, and you can define the start date. I'm now on slide 16, if that helps as well. Just moved over one. So for example, our platform, and you can see a logo there because we've just launched our logo as well. We've decided to start that on the 3rd of April. Our current project ends at the end of March, a current project. So staff, I don't need to enter into consultation meetings. Staff will move over from one project to another, although it's going to look different. The actual overall support that we give for people in communities will be merging from face-to-face one-to-ones into small group settings, but actually it's bridging that gap and making sure that people that were that are in the pandemic that couldn't meet or wouldn't meet as groups have got areas and arenas to do that. So we're launching platform around now, but the official start date is the 3rd of April, and the lottery give you 6 months. Looking at your team, are you working with volunteers or paid staff? Is it existing staff or new staff? Our Bridges project was 10, but this project is going to be 5. So it's looking at how that works, looking at the paperwork, GDPR compliant, confidentiality. Are we bringing in a distance travelled? These are all conversations that are happening now with the team, action planning and goals. Making sure obviously everything suits our policies, procedures, but it's also really user friendly for the individual, because some of our previous ESF projects, European Social Fund projects, were very paperwork top heavy at our end, and it's making sure it's clear and concise and that we're only asking for information that we need. And then looking at delivery venues, where and when we'll be delivering, and the structure of that. Is it in activities, interventions, face-to-face groups, or remote? And then the success, really, timelines for monitoring, evaluation reporting and measurement of success. And the lottery usually asks for 6 monthly reports, and they'll give a spec about what they detail and what they require within a Reaching Communities application. Again, this is a real whistle-stop tour, so over to questions and answers, and I'm really sorry to have rushed it, but thank you for listening.
That was amazing, Kate. Don't worry about rushing it. It's our fault for tech anyway. So yeah, anybody want to raise their hand in the chat, and any questions for me or Kate? George, yeah, if you want to unmute and ask away. Got to unmute your microphone first, George.
Apologies, Connor. Sorry. They're not really questions. I've just what I've, since I've been doing the applications from mid-counties, I've just put down a few things that struck me. For me, the first couple of lines of the application give interest, and I think that helps to, if you like, in quotes, sell the application for me personally. And there's no hidden agenda with what we're endeavouring to do on terms of mid-county, because we, quite blunt with you, we just want to give all the money away, if you don't mind me saying that, you know, because it's members' money. Members have, if you like, delegated us to do a job which we're very happy to do, but we want to ensure that the applications do meet the specification, and so we do want to ensure that we give all the money away and it is used for the, you know, for the benefit of the communities that they serve, because, you know, maybe next year or the year after or whenever, people will come back to us and say, you know, that really helped us, and you know, would you mind if we put in another application? As far as, you know, personally speaking, I say no. You know, we're pleased that we were of benefit to you, and please go ahead. I don't want to go back on these applications. I must admit I get a bit I like a full application where I can get my teeth into and say, yeah, this is good. I like this one, and I think we can really support it. I don't like sending applications back because I don't know when I'm going to get an application back, and how long that will be. So any application that I look at, if you can make it the best as you can, and serving its purpose, then it's helpful. I don't think it's any use to Andrew or myself if we've got to go and sort of say reject an application because that's how we feel about it. And I don't want to go back and then feel, I mean, I'm dealing with one at the moment and I think it's not really asking me, sorry, it's not really telling me what I want to know. So I'm in that case, I'm just inclined to say reject, and that's it. I would suggest that people, I don't know how these applications are done, but I would a suggestion that I have, it may be total load of rubbish, but I would suggest that possibly 2 people do the application. One does it, and then one sort of proofreads and says, are we actually giving mid-counties what they want in terms of their specification? For me, and I think that's a couple of times, I feel that could have been done better on some applications. And better proofreading, better the points made. So that's me.
Yeah, as you say, George, I think having proofreader is really important. I seem to recall possibly I might have scanned over one of JST's applications over a year ago now. I think I went through it because it's always beneficial, even if it's just small things, words, changing different types of words, not repeating the same word twice in a sentence. Just any little things, it's always worth a proofread, as you say. Anyone else with any questions for me or Kate? If there aren't, again, we've got a link in the chat where it's coming up to our community fund. So that's a £500 grant that we're very open to giving out. Takes about 4 to 6 weeks to turn around from application to sending the money out. You can apply once a year from anywhere in the UK. So please do utilize that. We're looking forward to seeing application. And I think I'm going to hand over to Deb. I'll talk quickly about the AGM.
Thank you for your patience with the technical elements here that we encountered. I appreciate you being patient with us. I guess the last thing that I wanted to just say to everybody that's on the call is, obviously, if you're an existing Mid-Counties member, you'll know each year we have our AGM, annual AGM, and this year is no different. So I'd just like to bring to your attention that on the 13th of May, we will be holding that at Cheltenham Racecourse. And as a member, you will get more information in due course, or you can look onto our website on the events page that I mentioned earlier. I guess from my point of view, thank you, Kate, so much for your time. George, from your point of view as a member of our MEC grant panel, from your point of view, those points are really, really great to hear as well. And everybody else that's joined us, I really hope that you found something that was of benefit to you. If there's further questions, that pop up after you finish the call with us, which they tend to do, you can always drop myself, Debbie Cullum, or Connor, who sent you the original invite, an email, and we will respond back to you. If you would like to take Kate upon a very kind offer of some sort of separate one-to-one talking about elements of maybe bigger grant funding projects, then we can liaise and facilitate that for you. Again, just drop that in an email to us. One last ask, with the technical issues aside, just for a little mini rating on how you felt the content of this was. If everybody wouldn't mind just putting a rating 1 to 10 in the chat bar, how you felt today's content was, 1 being not so good, 10 being really great, and anything in between. That just gives us an idea of how we can improve things next time round. George, you have another question?
No, I was just going to say, I don't know how it goes, but I'll give it a 9.
Thank you, George. If you could pop that in the chat bar, that would be lovely.
Tell me where the chat bar is, Debbie.
Okay, if you look to the top of your screen,
Yeah.
you will see a little speech bubble with the word chat underneath. And that should bring up a little panel to the side.
Oh, show conversation, is that it?
That's it, yeah. And then
Is
right
that
at the bottom, there's a little box and you can put your number in there for us.
Not
If
sure.
everybody else would be able to do that again, that really just helps us improve
I
things
see,
next time round.
Oh. I'll put it says type a new conversation.
That's
So
it, yeah.
whether that goes,
That's it, you pop it in there.
yeah. Whether it gets to you or not, I don't know, Debbie.
Well, George, we've got this recorded, so I have the evidence that you what you said. So
Well,
again,
I'll
everybody,
go with that, Debbie.
thank you. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Our apologies we overran a little bit, but again, that was the little few gremlins we had with the technology. So again, go away and enjoy the rest of your afternoon and your evening. And if you need us, you have our email address and we're happy to help you, anything community or grant related that you need.
Thanks to you,
Thank
Debbie,
you.
and Connor as well. Thank
That's
you.
all right.
Thank you, guys.
We'll send the slides out right now.
Yeah, we'll make sure everybody gets a copy of this whole presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you, guys.
So
Take care. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
See you
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye for
Bye.
now. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.